Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about the dark, lonely nights of Appalachia. Get ready for a journey through real encounters. 10 chilling tales of strange things that walk beneath November's cold Appalachian moon. But before we continue, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to like and share. Thank you all. Now, let's begin. My name's Jonas, and a few years ago, I spent a weekend I still think about way too often, out in this forgotten patch of eastern Kentucky called Keenan Hollow. Our great-uncle Rudy had passed the week before, and the property he left behind was sitting out there like some kind of forgotten time capsule. Dad wanted it cleaned up so he could get it on the market before winter hit. The plan was simple. Mason's dad would drive us out, drop us off with some supplies, and we'd clear out the shed and get a feel for what kind of shape the place was in. He said he'd be back the next night before sundown. Now, Rudy's house wasn't awful, just old. The roof sagged a little on one side, and the porch steps were warped, but it was standing, which is more than I can say for a lot of places out there. The real issue was the shed. It sat a good 50, maybe 60 yards behind the house, tucked just enough into the trees that it was half hidden. From the back porch, it looked like the woods were trying to eat it. Thick vines curled around the siding, and the door was nearly fused shut with ivy. We had to yank and cut at it for a solid 5 minutes just to get it open. Inside was what you'd expect: a pile of broken fishing rods, rusted tackle boxes, old milk crates full of screws and tools with the handles falling apart. It was like a garage sale for ghosts. But way in the back, behind a stack of warped plywood, we found something we weren't expecting. A trapdoor. It was built right into the floor. Wood, stained dark with an old iron ring handle. Not the kind of thing you accidentally build. It was hand-cut and reinforced like someone really didn't want it getting opened by accident. We both just kind of stared at it. Mason knelt down and gave it a tug. It was heavy, but it opened. The hinges creaked like you'd imagine, and we both leaned over the edge to look down. Narrow concrete stairs disappeared into black. It smelled like damp earth and old moldy cloth. We couldn't see the bottom, not even with the flashlight. "Nope," Mason said, standing up fast. "That's tomorrow's problem." And that was that. We shut it, left it unlocked, and got back to sorting through the rest of the mess. We crashed at the house that night. The electricity worked barely so. We had a couple lamps and the space heater running. We made dinner out of canned chili and saltines and spent most of the evening playing cards and joking about how much Uncle Rudy must have hoarded. You know, trying not to think too hard about that trapdoor. Then, sometime after 11, we heard the first knock. It was muffled. 3 dull thuds. Not loud, but solid, like someone knocking from inside the walls. We froze. "Did that come from under us?" I asked. Mason didn't answer. He grabbed the flashlight, flicked it on, and went outside. He checked the porch, walked around the house, even shined the light under it. Nothing. When he got back inside, we both sat down again, trying to act normal. Maybe it was pipes, or animals, or something settling. Old houses make weird sounds, right? Then came the second set of knocks. 3 again. Same rhythm, but this time it was clearer. Like it was coming from inside the floor. I didn't even pretend to be calm. "We need to leave," I said. "Walk to town." Mason looked at me like I'd suggested jumping into the Ohio River. "It's 10 miles through pitch-black woods. We've got 1 flashlight and no cell signal. If something's out there, we're better off in here." So we stayed. Around midnight, the knocking stopped. Then the scraping started. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't loud. Just this slow, steady drag. Like someone was pulling something heavy across a floor. It made my skin crawl. The house didn't have any wooden floors. It was linoleum over concrete. There was nothing underneath to drag anything across. I remembered the trapdoor. We'd never locked it. We sat there, flashlight off, the propane heater hissing quietly in the corner. I felt every sound like it was happening right next to me. Once, around 2 in the morning, I thought I heard whispering. Not voices exactly, more like distant noise filtered through water. I leaned my head against the wall to try to catch it. The surface was cold, not just chilly. icy. Then something touched the other side, just for a second, like a breath. At dawn, we grabbed our boots and bolted to the shed. The air outside felt safer somehow, even though I was shaking the whole time. The trap door was wide open. There were handprints on the underside, smudged in dirt, long streaks where fingers had clawed upward. I didn't want to go down there. I wanted to turn and run, but Mason was already at the stairs. He didn't say anything, just started descending. I followed. The cellar wasn't big, 6 by 6 maybe. Packed dirt walls, old wooden beams holding up the ceiling, a few old jars broken in the corner. But the carvings were the worst part. Circles, with little vertical lines inside them, carved into every beam, over and over again, like someone had done them in a trance. And in the middle of the floor was a pile of bones. Some were clearly animal, but a few, not so much. One of them looked like a femur, thin, too straight to be from anything with hooves. Then Mason whispered, "Don't move." I turned and saw him staring past me up the hill. There was someone there. A man, shirtless, barefoot, skin pale like candle wax. He was standing perfectly still between two trees, staring straight at us. No movement, no blinking, just locked onto us like he was waiting. I called out, "Hey, nothing." Not even a twitch. We backed toward the house slowly, Mason holding that crowbar like he'd actually use it. I kept glancing over my shoulder, afraid to take my eyes off the guy for more than a second. By the time we reached the back steps and looked again, he was gone. Not walked away, not ran, just gone. We hadn't heard a sound. That night, we did everything we could. Locked every door, propped chairs under handles, pulled furniture in front of the windows. It didn't matter. At 2:04 exactly, the screen door creaked, and then came the knock. 3 of them. Slow, measured, but this time, it was on the front door. We didn't answer, didn't move. I could hear Mason breathing shallow next to me, both of us pretending not to exist. It never opened. The knocks never repeated. We just waited until sunrise. Mason's dad pulled up around 8 the next morning. We were already packed, standing on the porch like kids waiting for the school bus. He asked if we were okay. Neither of us answered. We just got in the truck. He made a joke about us being Jumpy City kids. Then he went to look at the shed. He came back different. Didn't say a word the whole drive home. Never brought it up again. Back in November, I was staying with my Uncle Rob in a tiny, half-forgotten town in southern Appalachia called Tanner's Creek. The place barely showed up on maps anymore. Rob had been living out there alone for a while, tucked away in this old, leaning trailer just off a cracked gravel road with no street sign. The whole area felt like it had stopped moving decades ago. No cell reception for miles, no neighbors within shouting distance. Closest one was a retired guy named Darby about a mile down the hill, and even he was hardly around. Rob didn't mind the solitude. He liked things quiet. Said it helped him think better. He'd asked me to come help with a few things before the cold set in, mainly fixing some busted plumbing and patching up the skirting around the trailer. Last winter had nearly frozen his pipes solid, and he wasn't trying to repeat that. I figured sure I had time. And to be honest, I kind of wanted the break. City life had been grinding me down, and I thought maybe a little rural quiet would do me some good. Most nights followed the same rhythm. We'd eat something simple. Rob made a killer cornbread and beans, maybe play a few rounds of rummy, or just sit by the wood stove with mugs of instant coffee. By 9:30, we were usually done for the day. It was the kind of routine you fall into without noticing. But this one night, Rob stood up after dinner and said we needed to take a walk. Something had messed with the fence near the back edge of the property. When I asked if it was coyotes, he gave a small shake of the head. "You'll see," was all he said. He grabbed 2 flashlights from the drawer by the door, handed me one, and we stepped out into the cold. It hit sharp and sudden, the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache if you breathe in too fast. Wind cut through my jacket, carried this musty, dead leaf scent that smelled like the woods themselves were rotting. We followed the path behind the trailer, cutting through the patchy grass toward the tree line. The fencing ran along the back, marking where his property dropped off into the ravine below. When we reached the spot, I crouched down to get a better look. The wire wasn't pulled or chewed. It had been clipped clean and straight through, like someone had taken bolt cutters to it. No frayed edges, no teeth marks, just a precise break. The fence post was still standing, but the line had been peeled back and tossed aside, almost carefully. I was still staring at it when I heard something behind us. A crunch. Just one step, loud, deliberate, like a heavy boot pressing down on frozen leaves. I spun around, flashlight jerking wildly across the trees. Nothing, just branches and shadows. My heart gave a hard thud. Rob straightened up. "We're going in," he said, already stepping past the broken fence. I hesitated, then followed. The woods swallowed us pretty quickly. No trail, just uneven ground and tangled brush. We didn't speak. Rob led, moving slow but steady, flashlight scanning from side to side. I kept glancing over my shoulder, not because I saw anything, just couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. It got quieter the farther we went. I've been in forests plenty of times, but this was different. No wind through the trees. No rustling, no chirping, nothing. Just our own breathing and the occasional crunch underfoot. It was the kind of silence that presses on your eardrums, makes you feel like you're underwater. About 100 yards in, the ground dipped and we reached the edge of the ravine. That's when Rob's light caught something up ahead. At first it looked like a pale log or rock dusted with frost, but then I saw the legs. It was a deer lying on its side, but the way it was positioned stopped me in my tracks. The legs were stretched out perfectly straight, like someone had taken time to arrange them. The head was turned slightly, just enough that it looked posed. The torso had been cut open straight down the middle clean, precise, almost like it had been done with a scalpel. The ribs were untouched, perfectly intact, but the cavity was completely empty. No blood, no mess. Just a hollowed-out body resting on undisturbed ground. And no drag marks, no paw prints, no indication it had been killed or even moved. Just placed there. Rob crouched down beside it, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. "This ain't the first," he said, barely audible. I didn't get a chance to ask what he meant. There was another crunch, this time from higher up on the ridge above us. We both looked up. That's when I saw it. It was standing just between two poplar trees, maybe 8 feet up the slope. Its eyes caught the light greenish, reflective, animal-like. But everything else about it was wrong. It stood upright, but not in any way that looked natural. Its limbs bent in strange places, legs too long and angled backward, like the joints were on the wrong way. Its torso was stretched, skin tight and pale like stretched plastic. And it was swaying, subtly, like someone trying to stay balanced on a narrow beam. It didn't make a sound, just shifted slightly, like it was thinking about moving, or maybe waiting for us to. I reached for Rob without taking my eyes off it. He was already stepping backward. "Don't run," he whispered. "Don't turn." We backed out slow, one step at a time. My light kept flicking between the thing on the ridge and the path behind us. Every few seconds, I'd glance back up, but it didn't move, just watched. Then, suddenly, it wasn't there. I stopped, instinctively looking around in every direction. Nothing. I turned to Rob, but he wasn't looking at me. His flashlight was aimed to our right, toward a thick tree trunk, maybe 10 feet away. There was something behind it, smaller this time, human-sized, just a sliver of a head and a shoulder peeking out. I lifted my light and it jerked. A sudden, twitchy movement like a puppet yanked on a string. Its head tilted way too far, as if the neck had no clue where it was supposed to stop. Its mouth was hanging open, not wide, just enough to show teeth. Blunt, spaced too far apart. Not sharp, not monstrous, just wrong. Then it made this sound, half a wheeze, half a laugh, like someone trying to mimic giggling without knowing how it works. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Rob leaned in close. "Go," he said, "now." We didn't run. We just walked, steady, straight toward the break in the fence. Every step felt like it took an hour. I was sure if I turned around, something would be right behind me, breathing down my neck. I held the flashlight so tight my hand cramped. When we finally reached the fence, I reached for the latch and fumbled, dropped my flashlight. Bent down to grab it, hands shaking so badly I could barely hook the wire back. Inside, we slammed the door, locked everything. Rob lit the wood stove back up and sat in the old recliner by the window with his shotgun across his lap. He didn't say a word, just stared outside. We stayed up the whole night. When the sun finally came up, Rob insisted we check the spot again. I didn't want to, but he wasn't going alone. The deer carcass was gone. We patched the fence before noon. By the end of the week, Rob had listed the trailer for sale. I was 26 when this happened. Lived in a quiet town called Dorsey Falls, right up against the edge of White Hollow Forest. Not much goes on out there. I wasn't into any of that. Didn't hunt, didn't fish, didn't even drink much. My job was part-time delivery driver for Hawley's Auto down in the valley. Thursdays were my long-haul days, where I'd load up the back of the truck with belts, pads, alternators, and whatever else people needed, then wind my way through the back roads delivering to mechanics that seemed to live right at the edge of nowhere. That Thursday was one of those cold November days where it feels later than it is. The sun dips down behind the hills around 4:30, and by 5, it might as well be midnight. I was already on my last regular stop, Carver's Garage, just off Split Ridge, when Mitch asked if I could squeeze in one more. Said some guy called earlier that morning needing a set of brake pads and a serpentine belt for a '99 F-150. Mitch had already rung it up and everything, but none of the other guys wanted to drive out that far. Milner County line, he told me, which wasn't unusual. I'd been up there plenty of times. Said the guy left a name, something like Griggs, but Mitch didn't know him personally. Offered me $40 cash and a 6-pack if I dropped it off. I figured, sure, still some light left, and I'd driven every twist and turn in that county 100 times. Or so I thought. I made the turn off Route 19 and started the slow climb up Milner Ridge. It was quiet, that kind of unsettling quiet where even the birds seemed to have called it a day. About 15 minutes in, I noticed I hadn't passed a house in a while. Or a mailbox, just trees. Leafless, bony things that clattered softly in the wind. The fog was starting to pull in low along the tree line, thick enough in spots that it looked like smoke. That's when the GPS quit, no signal. Just a frozen screen and the little arrow stuck in place. I hit the dash a couple of times like that was going to do anything. It didn't. I was already too far in to turn back, so I slowed down and kept going, eyes scanning for any numbers on the mailboxes that might match what Mitch had written down on the receipt. Nothing matched. A few didn't have numbers at all. Some were barely upright. Then I saw a guy standing just off the shoulder. I hadn't seen him until I was practically next to him. He was just there all of a sudden, like he'd stepped out from behind one of the trees. Tall, thin, maybe late 40s. Wore this dirty blue coat and jeans that looked stiff with mud. He was standing by a rusted-out red mailbox that looked more like scrap metal than anything used for mail. His hand lifted in this slow, almost lazy wave. I pulled over and rolled the window down halfway. "Hey," I said, holding up the box. "You waiting on these?" He didn't speak right away. Just gave me a stiff nod and pointed up a gravel path to my left that I swear hadn't been there 2 seconds earlier. It wasn't a driveway in the usual sense, more like 2 muddy ruts that curved sharply uphill between the trees. "Up there," he said. I hesitated. "You want me to leave them here?" He didn't blink. "Up there," he repeated. Then he turned, not up the path, but into the woods. No hesitation. Just walked in like it was nothing, branches swaying around him. I sat in the truck for a solid minute, trying to make sense of that. Thought maybe he was taking a shortcut or didn't want to be seen getting stuff delivered. People around here are private. Some don't even want you knowing where they live. I'd seen weirder. So I put the truck in gear and started up the path. The incline was steeper than it looked. My tires spun a couple times before catching, and I had to swerve slightly to avoid a fallen limb that crossed one of the tracks. Trees crowded in on both sides. The higher I went, the darker it got. My headlights barely cut through the fog, just lit up a mess of trunks and brambles. Then the path opened up into a small clearing, and the truck coasted to a stop in front of an old A-frame house. It looked abandoned. Not decaying, not ruined, just left behind. Boards gray with age, shutters hanging loose, and a sagging porch that looked one good storm away from collapsing. There were no lights, no movement, but there was a blue pickup parked crooked in the grass, driver's door wide open. I left the engine running. Sat there for a few seconds just staring at the house. No one came out. Eventually, I grabbed the box and stepped out. The air was colder up here, heavier. Porch steps creaked and gave slightly under my weight, one of them dipping like it wasn't nailed down right. I knocked on the door. Light at first, then louder. Nothing. That's when I noticed the door wasn't fully closed, just hanging there, open maybe an inch or two. I should have set the box down and walked away. That would have been the smart thing to do. But instead, I leaned in and gave the door a nudge. "Hey," I called, not stepping inside. "Got your parts here?" The smell hit me. Not rot, not mold, something wetter, for all, like wet fur and iron. It clung to the back of my throat, sharp and wrong. I didn't go in, just bent down and slid the box inside with one hand. That's when I heard it. Upstairs, a slow, scraping sound. Something heavy dragging across the floor. I stopped breathing. The sound went on for maybe 4 or 5 seconds, long enough for me to know it wasn't the house settling, and then it just stopped. I backed off the porch one step at a time and nearly slipped off the last board. My boots hit gravel, and I'd bolted for the truck. Got in, slammed the door, locked it, heart pounding. As I shifted into reverse, the headlights caught something at the edge of the woods. Same guy, but he wasn't standing anymore. He was crouched low, arms resting on his knees, head tilted, watching. I froze. He moved, just a twitch, but it was wrong, like his limbs didn't quite know how to function. Jerked instead of flowed. Then he rose, slow and steady, and his arms, I swear to you, they didn't stop where arms are supposed to stop. They just kept going. Elbows too high. Fingers that hung way too low, almost brushing his knees. That's when I panicked. I slammed on the gas, tires skidding before they caught. The whole truck bucked, and I nearly lost control going down that hill. Didn't care. I bounced and slid and braked just enough to avoid flying off the path. When the tires hit the main road, I didn't stop to check for damage, just kept driving. Didn't look back once. I got to town and parked behind the shop. Killed the engine and just sat there until Mitch came out with a smoke in his mouth, asking where I'd gone. When I told him what happened, he looked genuinely confused. Said the guy just left a name and number. Didn't know anything about a house. I couldn't sleep that night. Kept replaying it in my head over and over. The smell, the dragging sound, those arms. Next morning, I called the sheriff's office. Gave them the address Mitch wrote down. They said there were no homes listed past the 30-mile mark on Milner County line. Said the A-frame that used to sit up there had burned down back in '93. Faulty heater, apparently. The whole thing went up overnight. No survivors. The blue pickup matched the description of a missing person's vehicle. A man named Hartley Griggs went missing 12 years ago. Left for work one morning, never showed up. Last ping on his phone came from somewhere near the ridge. I turned in my notice a few days later, told Mitch I appreciated the work, but I was done driving the ridge routes. He didn't ask questions. I've lived in Dorsey Falls my whole life. I've been on every back road from here to Green Hollow, but I haven't been up Milner since, and I never will again. Our high school out in eastern Boone County didn't offer much once the bell rang. No clubs, no theater, nothing that held my interest. So I picked up a side job through a family friend, clearing out old hunting cabins tucked into the hills. I'd gotten used to working alone, especially in late fall when the brush thinned out and the snakes weren't a problem anymore. One Sunday in early November, a guy named Marshall, he handled property management for a few absentee owners, dropped off a key and a hand-sketched map. He always drew his maps by hand, said GPS couldn't be trusted out there. This one was for a cabin about a mile off the old gas line near Ridgetop. The owner had left for Arkansas or Missouri or somewhere years ago and just abandoned it, but the land was finally going up for sale. I'd have to do a full sweep and get it ready for a photographer. He warned me his truck couldn't make it all the way in, said the last half mile was too chewed up from spring runoff and down limbs. I'd have to walk in. I left just after lunch, hit the ridge around 2. That time of year, the air already had that sting to it. Not snow yet, but you could smell it coming. The trail curved around a few overgrown turns and dropped into this little hollow where the cabin sat, leaning hard to one side like it was giving up, half sunk into the earth, like it didn't want to be there anymore. The windows were streaked with grime, and the door barely held on. It was the kind of place that looked like, if you coughed too hard inside, something would fall off. Nothing unusual, honestly. Inside, it looked like someone had been living there. Torn sleeping bags bunched in the corner, empty cans of beans, some cigarette butts mashed into the floorboards. It wasn't the worst I'd seen, but it made me pause. The air was thick and sour, old sweat and mildew, maybe a bit of something else I couldn't place. I made a mental note to tell Marshall, maybe see if he wanted the locks changed. Bagged the trash, swept up, and cranked open 2 side windows. The air inside was thick, damp, smelled like mildew and old flannel. Every time the wind kicked up, the back door creaked open, so I dragged over a rock from outside and wedged it behind the bottom corner. While I worked, I kept thinking about those sleeping bags. There were 3 of them, all flattened, dirty, and arranged in a weird kind of triangle. It didn't seem like just one person had stayed here, but if there were more, I didn't see their stuff. No packs, no clothes, not even extra cans. Just those 3 flattened bags and a few scattered cigarette ends. The sweep went fast. 1 big room, 2 little side rooms. One had a busted cot. The other was mostly empty except for a small desk and an old standing coat rack in the corner. That room made me uneasy, though I couldn't say why. There was something off about how clean it was, like someone had recently been using it, but only briefly. No dust settled, no footprints, just bare wood and that coat rack standing stiff as a person. I was just about finished when I noticed something strange. On the wood floor, there were deep drag marks leading from the main room into the back one. Not scratchy or erratic clean lines. Wide, too wide for a person. Too straight for an animal. No debris scattered, no sign of what made them. They ended at the far wall beneath the window, like something had been pulled there and disappeared. No stains, no scratches on the wall itself. Just the marks. I stared for a while, trying to make sense of it. Thought maybe furniture had been moved, but nothing in that room matched the width of the tracks. I even measured it against the coat rack, thinking maybe someone had dragged it, but the marks were wider than its base. I turned to leave, and that's when I noticed the back door wasn't cracked open anymore. It was shut. Not just pushed shut, latched from the inside. My first thought was that I'd somehow bumped it closed, but the latch was one of those old metal hooks, and it was hooked through the eye. You can't latch that from the outside. And the rock I'd wedged behind it was gone. Just gone. I stood there in the doorway for a while, listening. Didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I had to let it out in a slow hiss. The cabin felt suddenly heavier. Every creak of the old wood seemed louder. I checked every room again, opened the closet, looked under the cot, even checked behind the desk. Nothing. No footprints in the dust. No signs anyone was hiding. I tried to tell myself I just missed someone earlier. Maybe they slipped out, but it didn't track. I would have heard them. I stepped outside, and that's when I realized how quiet it was. No birds, no rustling, not even that usual wind sound through the pines. Just stillness. Flat and heavy, like the woods were holding their breath too. Then I saw the footprints. They weren't mine. They came in from the right side of the clearing, bare feet. No shoes, no tread. Just long, narrow prints in the soft dirt, toes spread wide like someone had been standing there a while, watching the windows. They curved around the back of the cabin and then just stopped. I followed them a few steps, heart thudding, trying to see if I missed something. but there was no return trail, no scuffed leaves, just a sudden dead stop, like the person who made them had stepped into the earth or been lifted out. That's when the hair on my arms went up, not like fear, more like something warning me to move. I didn't argue with it. I went back in, grabbed my pack, and stuffed the key into my coat pocket. Didn't bother trying to wedge the door again, just pulled it shut and locked the front, even though I knew that latch wasn't keeping anything out. The trail back felt longer. About 10 minutes in, I heard movement to my right. At first, it was soft, branches shifting, underbrush crunching just enough to notice. I slowed down. It slowed down too. I stopped walking. It stopped. I waited, turning slowly, trying to catch a glimpse. Nothing, just woods. I called out, said something like, "Hey, I'm still here," but even I didn't believe the confidence in my voice. Then I started walking again, and it picked up with me. Same pace, same distance, just out of view. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a coyote, a deer, but the steps were too steady, not scurrying or darting, just matching me. I yelled that I had a weapon. I didn't. The only thing in my bag was a folding knife and half a bottle of Gatorade. Nothing moved. Nothing answered. I picked up speed. The sound picked up too. Still parallel. Still close. It didn't stumble. Didn't break sticks or crash through the brush. Just glided along with me like it knew the land better than I ever would. That's when I broke into a jog. My heart was hammering, not from the run, but because I could still hear it. Not behind me, not ahead. Right beside me, keeping pace without trying. Then came the sound. It was different. Wet, heavy. Like something being dragged through leaves. Slow, sticky. I didn't look. Couldn't. I bolted down the hill, not caring how steep it got or how easy it would be to trip. I saw the pipeline gate and didn't stop. Climbed it in 2 steps, scraped my knee on the top, didn't care. Ran down the gravel road until I saw a marshal's truck parked crooked near the bend, engine running, window cracked. He looked up when I got close and let out this laugh like he thought I was being dramatic. Said something like, "What, see a bear or something?" I didn't say anything, just opened the passenger door, climbed in, and slammed it hard enough that he jumped. I think he figured something had spooked me, but he didn't press it. 2 days later, he called. Said someone had broken into the cabin. Asked if I'd gone back. I told him no. It was early November, the start of deer season, and I'd taken 2 weeks off work to stay at my Uncle Cal's old trailer out near Winlow. That part of the mountains doesn't really have street signs, let alone neighbors. Cal died about 4 years back, and no one in the family ever bothered to sell the place. Honestly, I don't think anyone really wanted to deal with it. The roof sagged, one of the porch rails was busted, and the propane heater made this god-awful wheeze when it kicked on. And after the year, I'd had 2 deaths in the family, a breakup, and a department reorg that left me answering to a 23-year-old. I needed quiet. First 3 nights were fine, nothing spooky. I split firewood, went out hiking during the day, ate badly, and didn't care. I'd brought a generator for power, and I rotated between watching old DVDs and reading paperbacks I hadn't touched in years. I think I slept 12 hours a night. It felt good. Only strange thing in that time was this black and white photo I found. It was in the bottom drawer of a desk Cal used to keep in the spare room. I was looking for matches and came across a bunch of odds and ends, paper clips, thumbtacks, one of those old plastic rulers that always smell faintly of cigarette smoke, and underneath that stuff was a framed photo. It showed a boy, probably 8 or 9, standing near the tree line, dressed in old clothes overalls, untucked flannel. Something about the picture looked off though. His head was turned slightly, and his face was blurred, like he moved just as the picture was taken. Not super unusual for old film, but the blur didn't look like motion. It looked smeared, like someone had rubbed it with their thumb. I figured it was just some old hunting buddy's kid or something, maybe even Cal himself. I put it back and didn't really think about it again until later. 4th night, things got weird. It had started to drizzle that evening, and the temperature dropped fast. I had the heat up, the generator chugging along in its box outside, and I was curled up on the old couch reading a tattered Clive Barker novel. Around 9, I heard what I thought was an animal outside. Some faint sound on the porch, real soft. I paused, listened again, and realized it didn't sound like an animal at all. It sounded like footsteps. Not the heavy thump of boots, more like bare feet. Light, slow, spaced out, pacing, almost like someone was trying not to be heard. The porch creaked a little under the weight, just once, like a board shifting. I didn't move at first, just sat there listening, holding my breath without meaning to. Then I leaned forward, picked up the shotgun from beside the couch, and stood up. My hands were shaking a little, not from fear exactly, but from adrenaline, that old instinct waking up in the back of my spine. I opened the front door. No one was there. Not even tracks in the wet leaves. Just that sharp pine smell and the sighing sound of wind between the trees. I scanned the woods, waited a full minute, then went back inside. Locked the door, double-checked the windows. Told myself it was a raccoon or a bear, maybe even wind-pushing branches against the siding. Next morning, though, I stepped outside and saw something strange. Just off the porch, in a little patch of bare earth near the steps, someone had laid out a small spiral using smooth, white stones, not natural placement. This was arranged, tight and deliberate, curling in perfectly. I stared at it for a long minute. It didn't look like something an animal would do. It looked careful, patient. I crouched down, brushed it away with my boot, and stood up fast. Looked around again. Still no one. No signs of other people, no tire tracks. No wrappers, no beer cans. Nothing. That afternoon, I was digging through the closet in the back bedroom, mostly boredom, and found something else I hadn't seen before. A portable CD player, real old school, the kind with the clunky buttons and the lid that barely stayed shut. Still had batteries in it. Next to it was a cracked jewel case with Otis, 1972 demo, written in smudged black marker. I thought maybe it was something Cal had recorded, like an old garage band demo. He used to mess around with guitars, so who knows. I figured I'd give it a listen. So I lay down on the couch, headphones in, pressed play. It started with static. Then this slow, dragging organ came in deep, dissonant notes that didn't follow any rhythm I could pin down. After about 30 seconds, a voice joined in. Male. Scratchy. Kind of low and sleepy, almost like someone singing through a bad dream. The words were wrong, some of them in English, some not. They sounded like children's songs almost, but twisted. The kind you forget halfway through and start making up lines to finish. One track started with silence, then a pop, and then I heard a child's voice, clear and close. Don't tell him no. Don't tell him no. Don't tell him no. Over and over, same tone. Calm. Repetitive. I ripped the headphones off, didn't listen to the rest. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every sound made me sit up. Around 2, I had to use the outhouse. Took my flashlight, stepped outside, cold air punching me in the chest. The woods were thick with fog. Everything felt slow, like I was moving underwater. As I came back across the clearing, I swept the beam of the flashlight across the trees and froze. Something was standing just inside the edge of the woods. Small, still, watching me. It looked like a kid. Couldn't have been more than 4 feet tall, but the way it stood, arms loose, head tilted slightly, completely motionless, made the hairs on my arms stand up. I shouted, "Hey!" No movement for a second. Then it stepped back into the trees. Not fast, just gone. I didn't follow. I went inside, locked every damn door, sat up in the armchair till the sky lightened. The next morning, I didn't even hesitate. I packed everything up. The whole place suddenly felt wrong, like I'd stayed too long in a place I wasn't supposed to be. I loaded my gear into the truck, tried not to think about the photo, the music, the figure in the woods. Then I rounded the back of the trailer and stopped cold. Another spiral, but this time not stones. It was bones. It was bones. Deer bones, by the look of it. Clean white vertebrae spiraled out carefully, almost artfully. 2 small hooves were placed right in the center, like punctuation. No signs of a carcass nearby, no blood, just the bones. It felt like a message, or a warning, maybe both. I didn't even lock the door behind me, just drove until the trailer disappeared in the mirror. That night, I crashed at a cheap motel near Kingsward, kept the TV on, didn't even bother brushing my teeth. I lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, shotgun propped against the wall, barely slept. Next morning, as I was repacking my bag, I found the CD player, right there on top of my clothes, which made zero sense, because I was absolutely certain I'd left it on the counter inside the trailer. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without really thinking, I opened the lid. Inside was a different disc, no label. Just a shiny black surface with a single scratch down the middle. I don't know what made me do it, but I hit play. The kid's voice again. Don't tell him no. Don't tell him no. Don't tell him no. Then a pause. Then another voice. Whispery. Low. Almost like it came from behind the headphones. Okay. I stood up, walked outside, and dropped the whole thing into the motel dumpster. Didn't even look to see if anyone was watching. Just turned and walked back in. Drove home without stopping again. There's this trail that cuts through the woods behind my parents' place. Nothing official, no signs or maps, just something the locals know about. I've been walking it since I was a kid. By the time I hit my teens, I probably knew every twist and bend better than I knew our own backyard. That morning was cold, early November, the first weekend of deer season. If you're not from a place like mine, that probably doesn't mean much, but around here, it's a whole event. Trucks parked along gravel roads, guys in orange wandering into the woods before sunrise, the whole deal. I wasn't going out to hunt. I just needed to be alone. We buried my uncle the week before, and since then the house had been stuffed wall to wall with family, casseroles, murmured prayers, and too much silence between the talking. Grief makes people weird. They either don't talk at all or they talk too much. I needed to breathe air that hadn't passed through someone sobbing. So I slipped out early, didn't even tell anyone. Just took my thermos, a sleeve of crackers, and my pocket knife, the kind that clips onto your belt, not meant for much more than whittling bark or peeling an apple, but it made me feel better having it. My phone was useless up there anyway. No service, that was the point. I walked slow, took the long path, let the quiet settle in. It was nice for a while. Leaves crunching, frost still clinging to the grass in the shadows, the kind of cold that stings a little when you breathe too deep. About an hour in, I came up on the third shack, the one I never liked. I stopped there, not sure why, maybe just curious to see how much worse it had gotten. It looked the same, like something had tried to claw its way out from underneath and then given up halfway through. I was standing beside it, sipping coffee and staring at the collapsed roof when I noticed the boot prints. They were fresh, still sharp around the edges, big, tool-like work boots. And they weren't mine. They cut behind the shack and headed straight into the woods, off the path, in a direction no sane hunter would go. I just stood there, looking at them. The prints were deep, like the person had been carrying something heavy or just moving with real purpose. I told myself it had to be another hunter, probably someone taking a shortcut or chasing after something. I tried not to let it get to me. Still, I didn't follow. Instead, I took the long way around the ridge loop, thinking the walk would clear my head. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. It wasn't just the prints. It was how wrong they felt, out there in a place I'd always had to myself. And then I saw the marker. It was maybe 20 minutes later. I'd just come down a slight slope when I saw it off to the right side of the trail. 5 stones stacked neatly, balanced way too precisely, with a small rabbit skull placed carefully on the very top. It looked recent, clean. I froze. I hadn't passed it earlier. I knew that for sure. There's no way I would have missed something like that. The trail isn't wide, and I'm always paying attention when I'm up there. That stack wasn't there before. For a second, I just stared at it, like maybe I was misreading it, like maybe some kid had built it. But it wasn't a game. That skull was too clean, too perfect. It wasn't just a pile of rocks, it was a message. I turned around right then. No slow walk, no second thoughts. Just turned on my heel and started back the way I came. My heart wasn't pounding yet, but I was locked in, focused. Every 20 steps, I started hearing something behind me. Nothing I could point to, no snapping branches, no voices, just little movements. Like leaves shifting, like someone trying real hard not to be noticed. At first, I told myself it was just my nerves. I kept walking, faster now, but the sounds didn't stop. They matched me, step for step. By the time I reached the fort near the ravine, I was on edge. I glanced down the slope, and that's when I saw them again, boot prints. But this time, they were heavier, deeper, and they were overlapping mine. Whoever it was had been behind me. Not beside the trail, not somewhere else, directly behind me, walking where I'd just walked. I didn't think. I just ran. I veered off the main path and cut into a narrow gully that dipped down toward a dry stream bed. I knew the area well enough to think I could loop around and reach the road without being seen. It wasn't a perfect plan, but I figured I'd be harder to follow that way. Big mistake. The moment I hit the bottom of the gully, I saw them, more markers. Not stones this time. These were made of sticks tied together with rough twine, jammed into cracks in the rock face. 3 of them, all different. One had something dangling from it, a little strip of denim and a single human tooth, threaded like a bead. My knees almost gave out. I stumbled back a step and just stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There was no good explanation. None. I scrambled back up the slope. My legs were shaking so badly I slipped twice and tore my palms on the loose gravel. I didn't care. I didn't even look behind me. I just got to the top and ran. Then I saw him. He was standing just off the trail, near the old deer blind. Still as stone. He had a thick canvas jacket on, the hood pulled up, green pants, no gloves. His face was raw red, like it had been scraped with sandpaper, except for this one pale strip around his eyes. The skin there was untouched, clean, like it had been protected, like goggles or something. His mouth was shut, but his jaw kept moving, twitching, grinding, like he was chewing something over and over again. We locked eyes, and I didn't wait. I just bolted into the trees, crashing through brush like a deer with a bullet in it. I heard him move. Heavy steps, breaking branches. I didn't think about where I was going. I just ran in the direction of the only place I knew, the third Blevins shack. I dove through the doorway, half collapsed as it was, and curled up behind the old stove, tucking myself into the broken timbers like I was trying to disappear. My whole body was buzzing with adrenaline. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly knocked my thermos over. Then I heard him outside, slow, steady footsteps circling the shack. Not rushing, just pacing, listening, waiting. At one point, he leaned against the wall. I saw the shadow of his boots through a gap between the boards. He just stood there, and then nothing. I didn't move for a long time. It felt like hours, but it was probably 20 minutes. When I finally crawled out the back, I didn't go near the trail. I stuck to the trees and stayed low, cutting behind the ridge until I hit the edge of the neighbor's pasture. My station was a prefab shed, metal walls, one tiny window, propane heater that only worked when it felt like it. Inside, I had a chair, a clipboard, a CB radio, and not much else. No Wi-Fi, barely a signal on my phone unless I hiked uphill with both arms out like I was praying to the sky. The point of the job was basic. I logged anyone who came through the area. Hikers, rangers, maintenance crews. If they showed up, they signed in. If they left, they signed out. I kept a paper log, radioed in anything unusual, and that was about it. By mid-November, traffic dropped off almost completely. The weather turned, the casual hikers stopped coming, and the hunters stuck to more interior routes. I started bringing books, crossword puzzles, even a sketch pad just to stay busy. Then, about halfway through the month, I noticed something off. There was a signature in the logbook I didn't remember writing. K. Hall. Just that. Right above mine. Same handwriting every time, perfect, uniform block letters, like someone was using a stencil. At first, I figured maybe a ranger had passed through early and didn't bother checking in with me, which wasn't unheard of. But when I brought it up with Dale, my supervisor at the main outpost, he said nobody by that name had clearance for our sector. Not even across the broader region. I got weird about it. Started double-checking everything. I kept the clipboard with me even when I walked the 30 feet to the outhouse. Locked the shed behind me every time I left, even just to stretch my legs. Still, the signature kept showing up. Always before mine. Always neat, never smudged or rushed. One morning, I decided to get in early. I don't even know why. Just had this uneasy feeling. It was still pitch black out when I got there. Snow had fallen overnight, light and powdery. I remember that clearly because I was thinking how untouched it all looked. Except it wasn't. There were boot prints, coming from the woods, straight to the shed. No side trails, no signs of an animal, no scuff marks. Just clean, deliberate tracks heading to the door and then heading back the same way. Only one set. They weren't mine, smaller than mine, but deep, heavy, like whoever made them was carrying something or wasn't walking quite right. I stood there for a while just staring at them, feeling that cold creep you get when your body figures something out before your brain does. Inside the shed, the clipboard was right where I'd left it, and the log had a new entry. K Hall, 7:13 a.m. I checked my watch. It was 7:15. I hadn't even unlocked the shed until 2 minutes ago. That night, I brought in one of my old trail cams from home. I didn't tell Dale, didn't mention it to anyone. I mounted it under the awning, facing the door. It was low profile, nothing fancy, but it worked. I'd used it for deer tracking before, and it had picked up everything from raccoons to hikers with GoPros. 3 days later, I took the SD card home to check. What I found wasn't just blank footage. It was like the camera had never been there. No birds, no wind in the trees, no critters. No images of me unlocking the door or walking past, just motionless still frames. Hours of them. But the log? Signed again. K Hall, 8:42 a.m. K Hall, 9:06 a.m. I finally called Dale. Dale. Told him something weird was happening, that someone might be tampering with the shed or the logs. His response? Probably some local screwing around. Change the lock if it bothers you. That was it. So I did. Bought a new padlock the next day from a hardware store out in Dry Branch. Made sure it was sturdy. Only 2 keys existed, mine and the backup that went straight into the lockbox at the main station 20 miles out. Nobody else. Next morning I pull up and something's already wrong. The lock is different, like totally different. Not just tampered with, replaced. It was now one of those keypad locks with no keyhole. I didn't own one. I didn't install it. And I know for a fact Dale wouldn't have driven out in the middle of the night just to swap hardware. The shed door was cracked open, like it had been left in a hurry. Inside, every single document was gone. The hiker logs, the maps, the maintenance notes, even the emergency checklist I had pinned to the corkboard. In their place, taped dead center to the window, was a single sheet of printer paper, plain white. Black text, "You're not logging out." I left. Didn't shut the door, didn't call it in. Just walked to the truck, got in, and drove. I don't even remember most of the drive out. I didn't stop until I got cell service again and pulled off the road near a diner to call Dale. He said someone would go out and look. Told me to take the rest of the week off. I didn't argue. That weekend, I stayed at my cousin Liv's place in Crossbend. She had a 2-bedroom house tucked near the ridge. Good privacy. I didn't give her all the details, just said I was feeling burnt out and needed a break. Saturday night, she went out with some friends, and I stayed back. Around 11, I stepped outside for a smoke. It was cold. Wind had that strange, sharp rhythm, big gusts followed by total stillness. I remember that part because I was just standing there kind of zoning out when I saw someone near the tree line. Not close, maybe 50 yards back, just standing there. I froze, thought maybe it was a neighbor or someone lost. I called out, nothing. I tried again, still nothing. Then they moved, not toward me, just sideways, real slow, almost like they were floating just along the edge of the woods, weaving through the gaps in the trees. I flipped the porch light on. Gone. I checked the trail cam. I'd brought it with me, just in case, and set it up pointing into Liv's backyard. I pulled the card. Nothing, again. No footage. Like it hadn't even turned on. I barely slept that night. Every time the wind moved, I got up to check the window. Nothing out there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. The next morning, Liv came back around 10. First thing she asked was if I'd gone into her room. I told her no. She paused for a second, then said someone had written something on her bathroom mirror. Just one word: stay. She wiped it off without thinking, but it rattled her. Rattled me too. We left that afternoon, packed our bags, and drove to a motel in Frayden, 3 towns over, nowhere near the forest. Back then, I was renting this narrow little duplex just outside a town called Crossford in western Pennsylvania. If you blinked while driving through, you'd miss the exit. The place was buried between wooded ridges and sat maybe 200 feet off an old state highway that hadn't seen proper maintenance in years. I found it through a friend of a friend, cheap, barely insulated, and not the kind of home you'd invite people over to. But for me, it worked. I worked swing shifts at a machine shop about 40 minutes away in Slaytonville, and all I really needed was a quiet place to crash and a halfway decent water heater. My neighbor, Everett, lived on the other side, retired, maybe late 60s. Kept his grass short and his blinds closed. We didn't talk beyond the occasional nod. He'd give this slow little wave if he happened to be outside when I pulled in after work. That was pretty much our entire relationship. The weird stuff started around the second week of November. I came home after a long shift close to midnight and noticed his porch light was on. Just his side. Mine stayed dark unless I flipped the switch. His light wasn't just on though. It was pulsing, like it couldn't decide whether it was dying or trying to stay alive. Just this slow, irregular flicker. I stood in the driveway for a second watching it, waiting for movement inside, but his place looked sealed up tight. No TV glow, no sound. Eventually, I just shrugged it off and went inside. Heated up some leftover stew and crashed on the couch. The next morning, when I stepped out to head to work, I noticed something weird right outside my front door. A circle of damp leaves, maybe 3 feet wide, laid out neatly like someone had taken their time with it. Right in the middle was a dead bird, a little brown thing, completely intact. No signs of trauma, just lying there with its feet curled in like it had been placed. I checked around for any sign that someone had been there. Everett's place was still shut tight, curtains drawn, porch light off. I ended up bagging the bird in a grocery sack and tossing it in the bin out back. Kicked the leaves away with my boot and chalked it up to some neighborhood kid being weird, or maybe even Everett playing some kind of quiet prank, though that didn't fit what little I knew of him. But the next morning, another circle showed up, smaller this time. No bird, just a cluster of smooth stones and a torn book page, the paper bloated with moisture. It looked like it had been ripped out of a dictionary or an encyclopedia. Most of the print was smudged, but one word stuck out: murmuration. That word rattled around in my head all day, even though I couldn't have told you what it meant at the time. It just felt, pointed, like it was meant for me. After that, I stopped cleaning the circles up. I think some part of me wanted to see if they'd keep coming, like testing a pattern. And they did. Every day, just before sunrise, a new one. Bits of twine, old keys, dried fruit, buttons. One morning, it was a row of flattened bottle caps, all lined up like a spine. That same day, Everett came out for a smoke while I was locking up. I figured maybe he'd seen something, so I called over. "Hey, you notice anyone strange walking around at night?" He didn't even glance at me, just exhaled and muttered, "You didn't tell them to stop." Then he turned and went back inside without another word. That night was the first time I felt real unease in that house. Not fear exactly, just that deep stomach knot kind of alertness. Like when you're walking through a parking garage and realize you're the only one there. I kept the TV on while I tried to fall asleep. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate steps on the gravel driveway. Not hurrying, not trying to sneak, just walking. I slipped out of bed and crept to the window, pulling the curtain back just a little. Nothing. But the steps kept going, passed under the window, paused near the porch. Then I heard it. This light scraping sound across the front door. Like something rigid, maybe a nail, maybe a stick, was being dragged across the wood in one long, careful stroke. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The scraping went on for 30 seconds, maybe more, then stopped. I stood there in the dark for 10 minutes before I turned on the lights. I kept every bulb in the house burning and left the TV running all night. I didn't even pretend to sleep. Next morning, the circle on the porch was made of coins. Rusty, tarnished things, all laid heads up like someone had flipped them on purpose. That's when I booked a room at a motel. There was a place in Leeville about 20 miles out, just behind an old diner. It had one of those neon signs with most of the letters burned out. I paid for 3 nights and brought a duffel bag and my work clothes. The first night there, I had a dream that I was lying in a field, flat on my back. All around me were birds, not flying, just sitting, watching. Their heads turned slightly, eyes fixed on me. They weren't dead, and they weren't moving, just waiting. I woke up around 3 to find the TV in the motel room playing some low-budget kids' cartoon with a squeaky-voiced bear hopping through a forest. I hadn't turned the TV on. I got up, unplugged it from the wall, and didn't sleep again until morning. When I got back to the duplex 3 days later, Everett was gone. No car in the driveway, no light, mail piling up in his box. I knocked just to be sure, nothing. I ended up calling the landlord. He said Everett hadn't given any notice, hadn't contacted him at all, just disappeared. That night, the cold came back hard. I was lying in bed, half dozing, when I heard it again, 3 sharp knocks on the back window. Then silence. Then, softer this time, a kind of hesitant tapping, like someone using just the tip of a finger. I stayed frozen in place, listening to the house hold its breath. Sometime around 4, I heard the front door latch press down. Just the latch, not the deadbolt, like someone testing it, gently. I got up, walked quietly to the door, and looked through the peephole. Nothing. I flipped the bolt, set the chain, and went back to bed with the hallway light still on. I didn't sleep, just waited for light to come. The final time it happened was maybe a week later, during the first real snow of the season. Just flurries, nothing sticking yet. I was in the basement doing laundry when I heard distinct footsteps upstairs, just across the kitchen, heel to toe. I froze. It was the kind of sound that leaves no doubt someone is up there with you. I stood by the dryer for what felt like forever, just listening, not even breathing. Then, after a long stretch of silence, I heard birdsong outside, a soft, distant flutter. It was the only reason I let myself go up. When I stepped into the kitchen, every single drawer was open. Not ransacked, just open. Pulled out to full extension, neat, almost surgical. On the counter, on a white dinner plate, was the bird. That same stiff, dried-out bird I had thrown out weeks earlier. Same curled feet, same angle, same size. I didn't stay. I didn't stay. I grabbed my bag and left. Drove to my cousin Marla's place in Akron and slept on her pull-out couch for a month. I didn't tell her why. Just said I needed to clear my head. When I went back to get the rest of my stuff, the place felt hollow. No sign of anything missing or moved. Everett's side was still empty. Never saw him again. My Uncle Darren had a stroke the week before Halloween. It hit him out of nowhere while he was chopping wood, and for a while, it looked like he might not make it. While my parents ran back and forth between hospitals and rehab centers, they decided I'd stay with my grandma for a bit. Not just for a night or two. They packed my duffel and said I'd be there for a little while. Grandma Oma lived way out in Wilburn Hollow, about an hour outside a town that barely had a grocery store. Her house sat past the old strip mine, way back where the pavement turned to gravel and then to nothing at all. The last sign I remember seeing was half rusted and crooked, just a green arrow pointing to Gilby Fork, a name nobody ever actually said out loud. Alma was already waiting on the porch when we pulled up. She had her coat on even though it wasn't that cold yet. Just stood there with her arms folded, squinting at the road like she already knew what we were going to say. She barely spoke. Just nodded when Mom told her thank you and gave me a quick pat on the shoulder. Then they were gone, their car disappearing in a trail of dust that hung in the air for way too long. Inside, the house hadn't changed since I was little. Still smelled like wood smoke and dried herbs. She had strings of what I thought were old bean pods hanging from the ceiling, and jars of pickled vegetables lined up like trophies along every windowsill. A horseshoe hung above the door, nailed in with 3 big iron spikes. She pointed me to the front room. It had the big cast iron stove, a quilt-covered couch, and that old Winchester rifle over the fireplace that no one ever touched. The kind of place where you notice the silence more than anything else. No hum of appliances, no distant traffic, not even wind through the trees. Just stillness, the kind that presses in on you. I didn't fall asleep easily that first night, but I must have eventually dozed off. What woke me wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. The kind that gets you before your brain catches up. I opened my eyes to see the door cracked open just a hair. Moonlight spilled across the floor, and something was moving out on the porch. I couldn't see it clearly, just a shape shifting behind the curtain. But what really got me was the window. The frost on the glass had started to melt in this narrow, perfect streak, like someone had leaned in close, face pressed to the pane. I could see the trail of condensation slowly sliding downward, still wet like it had just happened. I sat up and stared at it for a long time. Next morning, Alma was already in the kitchen when I came in. She was stirring cornmeal mush in a big black pot, steam fogging up the window behind her. I told her what I saw, or thought I saw. She didn't blink, didn't even turn. She just said, "If it knocks, don't speak to it." No explanation, no concern, just that. I wanted to ask more, but she didn't offer anything else. So I sat down and ate quietly, trying not to think about it. That evening, the wind picked up just before sunset. Not a normal breeze. It came all at once, loud and strange, like something had snapped loose from the ridge. Branches scraped across the roof, and something heavy knocked against the siding. The boards groaned under the strain. The house felt smaller somehow, like the pressure outside was pushing everything inward. I tried reading a book I'd brought, but I couldn't focus. The noises just wouldn't stop. Right after I crawled into bed, I heard it. Knocking. Not banging, not pounding. 3 soft, careful knocks. They came from the front door. I didn't move. My hands went clammy and I felt every inch of the quilt wrapped tight around me. My body went cold all at once, like the warmth had been sucked out of the room. I remembered Alma's voice. "Don't speak to it." So I didn't. Next morning, she asked if I'd heard anything. I lied. I said no. She looked at me for a long second, then said, "Then it ain't interested yet." She said it like she was testing me, like she already knew the answer. We spent most of that day outside. She had me help chop kindling, sweep out the smokehouse, and clear some debris near the garden fence. The woods felt different. Everything was darker, even though the sky was clear. The leaves weren't golden or crisp like they should have been. They looked waterlogged, bruised, already half rotted. There was no smell of autumn, just this damp, metallic scent in the air. Near the edge of the woods, I saw them. Stacks of rocks. Little towers, maybe a foot high, balanced in weird shapes. Too precise to be random, but too messy to be decorative. There were 5 or 6 of them, all arranged just before the tree line. I asked Alma what they were. "Markers," she said. "For what?" She didn't answer. Just kept walking like the question didn't matter. That night, I heard the knocks again. Same soft tapping. 3 times. Then, after a long pause, 3 more, slower, like it was giving me time. I stayed absolutely still. My chest barely moved with each breath, and I kept my eyes shut tight even though I wasn't asleep. I counted in my head. Counted past 100 before I drifted off. I dreamed again. This time, I saw a man tall, bony, barefoot. Skin like bark, rough and splitting in places. He had no eyes, just smooth gray skin where they should have been. He stood inches from me, close enough to feel something radiating off him. Not heat, something else. He leaned down and moved his mouth like he was whispering, but I didn't hear words. I just felt hollow. The next morning, the door was open. The frost had crept halfway into the house. Alma said nothing. By the fourth night, it wasn't just the front anymore. I heard knocks from the back too. 3 up front, then a pause, then 3 behind the house, like it was circling. I lay there still as stone, sweat pooling under my arms and along my spine. The room felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath with me. Then came the slap. One sharp hit against the side of the house, wet, heavy, like a handful of mud hitting the boards. The next morning, I told Alma I wanted to leave. She just looked at me and said, "It's November. You brought it with you." I stared at her, waiting for a joke, or anything, but she turned and walked out the back door. Later that day, I went to the outhouse. That's when I saw the prints, coming from under the house. Long, narrow, bare feet pressed deep into the mud. The toes looked too far apart. Each step left a gouge, like it was dragging something behind it. That night, no knocking, but I heard something worse. Whispers, not outside, from inside the walls. They weren't loud, but they were clear. And they said my name, only it wasn't my name exactly. It was like someone trying to say it, stretching it out, pulling the syllables too long, like they didn't quite remember how words worked. I screamed. Alma rushed in with a shotgun. She saw me pointing at the wall. Didn't even ask what happened. She just said, "Come on." We walked barefoot out into the cold, her in just her shawl, me in my pajamas. She didn't bring a flashlight. We went to the family cemetery at the bottom of the hill. Fog was rolling in from the creek, hugging the ground like smoke. The grass had gone gray, dead quiet. She knelt by one of the oldest graves and took out something from her coat, a dried corn husk. She whispered into it, soft, like she didn't want the fog to hear. Then she buried it in the frozen ground and stood up without a word. We didn't speak the whole way back. I slept through the night and swear to never look back. At the time, I was crashing in this beat-up old hunting trailer on the edge of a timber site near Dunley County, way out where the trees outnumber people by a few thousand to one. My cousin Mark had a small-time logging operation going, and he needed help clearing some plots before the ground froze up. I figured it was a good way to make some cash before winter, and maybe get a bit of breathing room from the usual chaos back home. Mark lived a good 20-minute drive away, but I liked staying closer to the job site. Gave me a break from people. It sat on a narrow patch of clearing just off a back trail, surrounded by pine and birch so thick you could lose sight of it 10 feet out. Inside was bare bones, a cot, a small folding table, a couple of hooks on the wall for jackets and gear. Mark had set it up years back for deer season, but no one had really used it in a while. You could tell by the way everything had a faint dusty smell, like dry bark and old wool. The first couple of weeks went by without anything strange. It was early November. The mornings were crisp, afternoons just warm enough to sweat through layers, and nights cold enough that you could see your breath inside before the fire got going. I got into a rhythm, wake up early, haul brush and cut logs with Mark all day, get back to the trailer after dark, heat up a can of soup or beans, maybe listen to the radio, then crash hard. That kind of tired where your body doesn't give you the option to stay awake. Then came the 10th night. I remember checking the old wristwatch I kept hanging on a nail near the stove. It said 2:15. I hadn't heard anything, and I didn't remember dreaming. I just opened my eyes and felt sharp, not anxious, not scared, just hyper-aware. Like my brain had flipped a switch on its own, the kind of waking where you don't know what's wrong, but you're damn sure something is. I sat up on the cot and glanced out the small window over the stove. There was a light in the woods, way off, maybe a few 100 feet out. It was faint, barely visible through the branches, but it was definitely there. It pulsed slowly, reddish, like an old brake light stuck blinking in the distance. except there wasn't a road that way, not even a trail, just solid forest. I stared at it, trying to figure out what it could be. A lost hunter maybe, but no one else was supposed to be out there. Mark would have told me. Maybe a reflection, but from what? There was no moon that night, and I didn't keep any lights on inside the trailer. I watched it blink, slow and steady, one pulse every few seconds. For nearly 10 minutes, it just kept going, never moved. Never got brighter or dimmer. Eventually, I pulled the curtain shut and lay back down. I don't think I fell asleep again until sometime around dawn. Next morning, I hiked out in the direction of the light. It took me about 15 minutes to reach the general area. I wasn't expecting to find much, but I figured I'd at least spot something. Maybe a flashlight someone left behind, or a fire pit, or even just tire tracks. But there was nothing. No signs of anyone. No light source. The ground was undisturbed, covered in old pine needles and patches of moss. I was just about to head back when I noticed something up in the trees. About 30 feet off the ground, wrapped tight around a thick branch, was a piece of twine. Just dangling there, swaying a little. It looked old, faded, frayed, like it had been there for years. No idea how anyone would have gotten it up there. It was tied in a tight loop, almost like a noose, but I didn't want to dwell on that idea. That night, I barely slept. There were no lights this time, but around midnight I started hearing something moving outside the trailer. Not crashing through the brush or anything loud, just slow, careful footsteps, pacing, circling. The kind of movement that says someone's trying not to be heard, but isn't quite pulling it off. I stayed in the cot, heart thudding, listening. At one point I sat up, grabbed my flashlight, and swung the door open. Nothing but cold air and trees. The steps stopped as soon as I moved. I stood there for a long time watching, but there was nothing. 2 nights later I got back after work and something felt off. It was small stuff, but noticeable. My thermos, which I always left on the table by the stove, was gone. Just gone. The cot had been shifted slightly, a couple of inches at most, but I knew exactly how I left it. I told myself maybe a raccoon got in, but the latch on the door was still hooked. Nothing else was disturbed. My pack was untouched. The food I'd left in the cooler was still there. Just the thermos missing and the cot a little out of place. I didn't say anything to Mark. What was I going to tell him? That my coffee thermos ghosted me? I just started latching the door tighter and wedging a piece of firewood behind it at night. Made me feel a little better, even if it probably wouldn't do much. That night, I heard it again. The pacing. A little after 3 this time, but then it stopped. And I heard 3 knocks, soft, deliberate, against the far wall of the trailer, near where the propane tank sat outside. Then nothing. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just sat there, staring at the paneling. A minute later, 3 more knocks. Same rhythm. And then silence again. By the 14th, I was fraying. Physically, mentally. I wasn't sleeping more than a couple hours a night. I was jumpy, scattered. I nearly took a chunk out of my own hand with the chainsaw that morning because I wasn't paying attention. Mark asked if I was sick. I told him I was just tired. He nodded but gave me that look, like he didn't quite buy it but wasn't going to push. That night, I didn't even bother changing. I left my boots on and kept the axe from the woodpile next to the cot, just in case. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound, quiet, breathy humming, like someone trying to sing a lullaby while struggling to remember the tune, short, broken gasps between the notes. I froze. It wasn't outside. It was inside the trailer. I couldn't see anyone. The darkness in there was thick, like it was pressing against my eyes, but I could feel it. I wasn't alone. The humming moved closer, then stopped. My mouth was dry. I couldn't even swallow. Then I felt it. The cot shifted, just slightly, like someone had eased down onto the other end. I didn't think. I just moved. Rolled off the cot, grabbed the axe, and yanked the door open. I ran, barefoot, through the cold, stumbling over roots and rocks. I didn't stop until I saw Mark's porch light glowing between the trees. My feet were bleeding by the time I got there, and I couldn't get the words out for a solid minute. When I finally told him what happened, he didn't laugh, just handed me a towel and told me to sit down. We went back the next morning, The trailer door was still latched. Everything looked pretty normal. But inside, the air smelled burnt, like singed hair and plastic. And carved into the wall above the cot, in jagged letters, was a single word: stay. I didn't. I packed my things that same afternoon, tossed everything into the truck bed and didn't look back.